Tough, ruthless, no-nonsense man. We've come up with all forms of superlatives to describe Erik ten Hag. And as we do edge towards the end of the season, with Ineos waiting to make a decision on his future, here I am to talk about the pros and cons of Erik ten Hag's style. My name is Webb. A very good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for tuning in to the United Hotspot. Now, Erik ten Hag can be described in many ways, depending on what your view and your perspective. He is all forms of things. He's not one guy you look at and you all say, this is his character. He can be too ruthless. He can be a little too patient. He's a confusing character. But here are, for me, the pros and cons of his personality and his coaching style and generally his style at Manchester United as we do head fast towards a vision on his future. One, let's talk about the football. Erik ten Hag's style of play, his philosophy, he believes in building from the back, being proactive, build from the goalkeeper and pass the ball and build to a run, be quick in transitions, press, the again pressing, the famous again pressing is what he wants to see. He also believes in players working hard for each other. You run around and support each other. You fight for the ball together in numbers. When you lose it, you fight for it in numbers. When you have it, you press in numbers. That is his style. But we've clearly struggled to see this applied at Man United, or at least executed at Man United in the games we've watched. Probably, and as he said, he did not have the quality to play his style because most of the players he had at Ajax are not the ones he has now. The style of players he had at Ajax are not the players he has, and that's why he had to bring in a couple of players from there at Ajax to try and come and implement his style. Well, it is certainly not looking easily implementable with the current lot of players, but he's hoping that with another transfer window, he can be able to get the right players to execute his style. Not to forget that some of the players he brought in to execute this style have also failed drastically. Case in point, Anthony. I will talk about Anthony later. So that's generally his style of play. But sticking to the football, Erik ten Hag's style has been questioned by many, especially when it comes to the management of the game management. His substitutions has for more times than not been questionable, pulling off players who clearly should be staying on for players who are going to give you nothing. He has also can be questioned for selection, starting certain players. For example, at some point where he was starting Scott McTominay and Marcus Rashford consistently, yet clearly they were not good enough. They were never giving us results. So is Anthony. Well, the name Anthony will probably keep coming throughout this video. So that as well, I think, created holes and questions about his coaching style and his game management. So his game management still has got certain players frustrated. And don't get it twisted. I think globally in football, if you have many players, if some are playing, those who are playing are always not going to be happy. But we've seen managers like Sir Alex Ferguson, who have made even the bench players like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer happy to come and play for a few minutes and contribute. So you cannot say, because in football, footballers know that there will always be bench players, and you cannot have all players starting. So it can't be that with Erik ten Hag, you have players like Mad Diallo sad that they are not playing. Have players like Pelistri, who was loaned out, who was also sad for not playing. It means the way you manage these players is not right. That takes me to the next point. From the pitch and the tactics and the playing style to his man management. Erik ten Hag's man management can be questioned in many ways, because it cannot be by mistake that you, the same manager, are ruthless as you are, as we praise him every day, day in and day out. Ruthless as you are, it cannot be that you're the same manager who is falling out with Cristiano Ronaldo, arguably one of, if not the greatest legend at Manchester United. You're falling out with Cristiano Ronaldo. You're falling out with David De Gea. You're falling out with Jadon Sancho. You are falling out, it seems to be falling out with Ahmad. So the young and the old are all falling out with him for different reasons, by the way, not entirely the same reasons. It shows you there could be something wrong with you. It can't be that so many players, young and old, are all seeing loopholes in you, and somehow you're not the problem. They are the problem. So his man management can be improved. The way he speaks to the press as well, I think, is part of why his man management is questionable. You don't go out in the press and attack a player like Cristiano Ronaldo, a legend at Man United, when you, in your first season in the club, in English football. A club like Manchester United respects their legends. It's the standard. Regardless of how ruthless you think you are, you've got to respect legends of the club. That is, for me, a weakness when it comes to man management. Two, things cannot be done in the press. When it comes to managing someone, Sir Alex Ferguson had one thing about him, that even when he fell out with his players, many a time he would go out in the press and back them and just give them his hair dryer treatment in the dressing room, and it would stay there. We get to learn some of these things, of course, if they break out. I think in those rare occasions they would break out, but mostly after these players are left and retired, that's when we get to we got to know the details of some of things. With Erik Ten Hag, he himself is going out to the press and attacking players, his own players. He seems to have a certain arrogance about him that players cannot stand. That is a poor way to manage these Generation Z players. And not that they don't have their issues themselves, but what makes you a good manager is knowing that you are managing players of this generation, and generally this is their character. For me, that's a bit of a weakness on him. But there are advantages to his character as well. We've had one too many lazy players at Man United that needed a ruthless manager to come and get football out of them, to come and force a reaction out of them, to come and set standards out of them. Now, for me, do I think he's tried to set standards? Without a shadow of a doubt, he has, because players seem to be working hard. The lazy players are not getting the opportunities. Two, he's giving players proper challenges, because I mean the way he wants to play by its own nature is demanding. So they certainly have got to be running and putting in the hard yards. So you credit him for setting standards in terms of how to train, in terms of how to behave, but also him banishing some of the players of the wrong characters from the team is a sign that he's setting standards of how they should behave at the club. Beautiful stuff. But isn't he perhaps taking it a notch too higher? Isn't he beginning to lose it from being ruthless to becoming a poor man manager? There is a thin line, like I always say, between the two. So that can be a weakness on him. Erik Ten Hag has got pros to him, to his approach, because we saw how he performed in his first season. He has also got pros in terms of players he has signed, because he signed Casemiro, signed Lisandro Martinez. Those are good signings. Rasmus Højlund, impeccable signings. So those are advantages. Maybe he has got an eye for good players, but at the same time, like any manager, he gets it wrong. He has also got disadvantages when it comes to certain players he has brought in. Players like Anthony, who have failed drastically, and we spend lots of money on them. It didn't make sense. Andre Onana, we can still be divided on him, but without a doubt, Andre Onana is a good goalkeeper. So he can also join the lot of those who he identified and brought in, but who are good. The issue with the arrival of Andre Onana was the manner in which he came. Erik Ten Hag and the way he let go of David De Gea was not good for a player who has been your number one shot stopper for more than a decade. Again, goes back to man management. And you see, the way you treat these senior players is going to send signals to the young players, to those who stay, saying, if Erik Ten Hag can treat Cristiano like this, like Cristiano Ronaldo like this, who is a role model to half of the dressing room, or if not the entire dressing room of Man United, if Erik Ten Hag is going to treat David De Gea like this, what will he do to poor Garnacho? What will he do to poor Kobe Maino if things go wrong? And speaking of Kobe, brings me to the next pro of advantage with Erik Ten Hag and his style. He has given chance to young players, and we can fault him for not giving chance to some, or taking his time to give chance to some, but we should credit him for giving chance to Kobe Maino. I don't think, well, I don't know whether we should entirely credit him, because Kobe Maino's talent speaks for itself. Whether he liked it or not, he had to. I think he just had to, given the situation and circumstances we are in. There were no players, there was no money to sign serious players. He had to look from within and give chance to a player like Kobe, and boy, didn't he pick up his chance and run away with it. So we can't credit him for that, giving a chance to young players, to Garnacho as well. But you do recall that it took his time to give Garnacho his chance. And I can partly say, I think our noise had a role to play in Erik Ten Hag finally giving Garnacho his chance, because we felt for a long time he was so patient with Marcus Rashford, and he was not giving a chance to Garnacho. Yet this boy was clearly a better option at the time than Rashford, who was off his purple patch. So Again, that can be a division, can be both advantage and a disadvantage. The disadvantage is he can be a little too patient with his players. He was a little too patient with Marcus Rashford, and it's a good thing to be patient with players. It shows that you believe in them, but it's wrong to be too patient. We are all patient, but when become too patient, you lose it. Two, Anthony Dos Santos. Erik is so patient with Anthony Dos Santos. Anthony has failed to respond, and he himself has almost given up on him. But by the time he's giving up on him, other players like Amad Diallo are losing it. They are becoming frustrated. Pelistri, left on loan, frustrated. So maybe that's why I say a little too patient will frustrate other players who clearly see they deserve a chance. So that can be both an advantage, but perhaps it's mostly a disadvantage because it's frustrating the bigger group. Look at Elanga. Anthony Elanga never felt like he should be leaving United. He felt he was better than many of the players at the club now. But Anthony was prioritized ahead of him. But of course, you can understand that there was clutter in the right wing. And man, Anthony Elanga was never going to come in and, of course, break through the ranks. He was always going to be on the bench. Maybe the best thing for him was to leave and play football elsewhere. But goes back to the same thing. Erik ten Hag's too much patience and trust in his own players can have at times frustrated other players who feel that they needed a chance. He has not given fair chances to everyone. Why? Favoritism. There seems to be a certain level of favoritism with him, which is not good, and certain players are beginning to have it. And that's why you end up having an unhappy dressing room. So as we do head towards the end of his season and going into a stage where a decision has got to be made on his future, for me, what things can Erik ten Hag improve on himself if he's going to stay? And I wouldn't mind him staying, but I think he has got to improve on himself. One, his ruthlessness. He has got to handle things differently. I think Omar Berada coming in has helped him a bit to handle, for example, the Marcus Rashford situation and all. Maybe the reason he was so ruthless is because everything weighed down on him. There was a lot of everything was on him, and at times you get overwhelmed. It becomes a problem. That's why the structure was long overdue. It was always needed, but he has got to improve on his man management. We hope that will be done with Ineos and the support structure that they're putting around the manager. Two, he has got to improve on his tactics. Whereas we've got issues with the injuries and stuff, but that does not stop a good manager from implementing his style and making these players, because by the time they're Man United players, they cannot be that bad. You need to be able to make these players execute your style. For you to do that, make them believe in it. So probably they don't. So that's something he has got to improve. He has got to improve the belief from these players in what he's trying to make them play. Otherwise, he is looking like he's abandoning them, and that's why we keep getting one injury after the other. That is a disadvantage. So that's an area Erik ten Hag has got to improve. He has got to improve on his communication in the press. The things he says, especially about his players, but also especially after a bad game. Well, you don't go out after losing to Fulham at Old Trafford and you say, we played well. No, Man United doesn't lose at Old Trafford to Fulham, and as the manager, your first words are, "We played well." You're losing it. It shows you don't understand the club you're managing and the level and the expectations the fans have of you. You are exposing yourself. You don't say that in the press, even if it could be the reality and you see improvements in your team. You might want to keep that to yourself, but come and say the right words to the press. For me, that's a very important thing. You should also have the emotional intelligence to know when to talk and when not to. Some questions that are provoked at him, that are thrown at him to provoke him from this British media, are always going to put him off and end up getting him to say the wrong things. So for me, those are a few of the weaknesses that I think Erik ten Hag can work on. Are there things he can work on? I think so. I think nothing is impossible. He's also new in the trade, coaching such a huge club, huge expectations. There's a lot of pressure on him. It comes with a lot of scrutiny. Every decision you make, some guy web somewhere who never played football to a quarter that level, who has not started football in class, will come out there and scrutinize it. But that's the nature of coaching this big football club called Manchester United. It's the nature of the job, and he has got to live with it. That said, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, the pros and the cons, I think the cons outweigh the pros that he has, which is a bad thing, but that doesn't mean that he cannot lift himself up and have the pros of bypass the cons. So I think for me, the pros are 4 out of 10, the cons are 6 out of 10, or close to 7 out of 10. So he has got to work a lot on his personality, his game management, his man management, his tactics, and his handling of situations and the media. If he works on those, he can lift himself up and, of course, reduce the cons and improve on the tactics, on the pros. And trust you me, he could be the next big thing at Manchester United. My name is Webb. This is the United Hotspot. I'll catch you later.